Oregon's picked up 2 commitments recently, and more recruiting news is on the way. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. We've got Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network, joining me as always, brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. Let's jump right into the offensive line commitments that Oregon has picked up recently. A week ago at this time, there were count them, zero big boys up front for Oregon in the 2025 class. That has since changed. Let's start with Ziyare Addison, 4-star offensive tackle. When you watch his film, you see what sort of traits?
Well, this is a kid that has been a wrestler and a basketball player coming up the ranks, and then he played D-line until like his sophomore year, so his feet are the key. He's as athletic a left tackle as there is in the class, has a lot of upside. He's 280, 285 right now, but he still looks fairly thin. Just tremendous athlete. Best attribute is pass protection. He's one of the best in the country at it. He's going to get more powerful as he gets older and be able to run block better, but he is the guy that you want to set the edge. To put it in perspective, Georgia, Bama, Florida State, Miami, his offer list is through the roof.
So his commitment came with kind of an affirmative statement that he was shutting down his recruitment, because certainly verbal commitments, as Oregon fans and every fan base should well know by this point in time in the summer, they mean something because they stay committed to their schools, well over 80 or 90% of the time. But there will be kids that could flip late, that could decommit, and we of course follow all of that sort of stuff throughout the summer. But what do you think it was about Oregon that made him say, I'm shutting down my recruitment, I'm not taking visits, I'm not taking calls, this is a spot where I want to be? And do you think that played at all off the fact that he's really the first offensive line commit of the 25 class?
I just know they recruited him really hard. I know Ziyare personally, and that's a school that's been on him for a long time. Going into the visit, UCLA was the team to beat, but Oregon was up there. So whatever happened on the visit convinced him. Maybe it was the culture, maybe it was the coaching staff. I'm not sure. I haven't had a conversation with him since, but I do know that UCLA was the team to beat. So for him just to shut it down, they must have hit a home run on the visit, because that shocked me, because his list of favorites has changed like the wind. So I'm not buying that he's not going to take any more visits either. I'll believe that when I see it. But he committed to Oregon on the spot, so that's a good sign for the Ducks in the long haul.
When you look at the sort of player he is, coming in at only 280, 285, that's around the weight I think that Josh Connerly was when he committed back in the 2022 class. Does he have that same sort of athletic profile, and why you look at him and say this is a prototypical left tackle with the athletic build that he has?
Yeah, absolutely. His feet are tremendous. Wrestler, basketball player, guy that played D-line until later on in his life. Everything he's done has been based on lateral movement, which will help your kick step to pass protect, and that's why he's really good at it. He's played 5-on-5 and the tournaments and stuff, and he's one of the best in the country at that. He's been a kid that's trained constantly for the last 3 years. I remember him when he was like 235, 240, and looked like a tight end. The difference between him and then and now is 50 pounds. It's a huge transformation, but that was two and a half years ago, something like that. So anyway, he looks like the guy that you would want to be your long-term left tackle.
What do you think his timeline is? 2025 recruit, and it's hard to play in the trenches as a true freshman. You and I have talked about that before. It's easier to other positions just because of the physical maturity that is required. Could you see him having a role as a true freshman, or is this a guy who, maybe takes a redshirt season, plays in a handful of games, gets some mop-up duty to just kind of get his feet wet, and is maybe more poised to be a starter in 2 years for the Ducks?
I think your latter point there is the more likely one. That scenario would not force him to be trying to eat like a horse and get out of shape just to gain the weight. It has to come naturally, but you need the strength training to run block at the Power 4 level. When you're playing at Ohio State, when you're playing against Michigan or Penn State or UCLA or Washington, those teams have players that have NFL aspirations. They don't do really well against those kind of players. I'm about freshman offensive tackles. That usually doesn't go well. I know Josh made that transition, and that's rare, but I think that's more exception than rule. So I think as a sophomore, he could compete, and as a junior, he should be well entrenched in the starting lineup.
And even Connerly, who was one of the most highly sought-after tackles in that 2022 class, he played as a true freshman, but he was an extra offensive lineman in the jumbo package. He wasn't starting. Yeah. The only true freshman to ever start at left tackle, I think, in my lifetime is Penei Sewell, and I think we're seeing now that guy is a freak of nature. Now I think the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL because, well, he's insanely good. He's a right tackle up there, of course. But let's move to the other offensive line commitment that Oregon snagged recently. Demetri Manning, 3-star offensive lineman, big guy, 6'6.5", 345 pounds. What do you see from him on film that impresses you?
Don't stand in front of him. It's bad for you. He is so big. I think he's bigger than 345. I'm not sure, but he's a power run blocker. The high school he plays for has option tendencies, power football, traps, and different things like that. So I don't know if he can pass protect. There's no film really of it. But when he goes forward, the guy in front of him goes backwards. He's an old school 1985 offensive tackle that played at USC or something. You know what I mean? He's that guy. Really, really strong. Now he just has to recondition his body. This is a kid Miami wanted. This is a kid that Georgia looked at, etc. Schools that take the really big guys, try to change their body weight and redistribute it. Oregon's similar to that. Dan has had a few guys that are big. Obviously, they took a young man last year. It was about 390, I heard, coming out.
Shaq McCroy?
Yeah, it's 390.
Oh, last I heard he was 365, but this stuff is more you would know better than myself, and he's a mountain of a man.
I don't think Manning is as big as Shaq, but at the same time, he's in that realm. I think they're trying to build more SEC defense, but the offensive line, I think Dan would prefer if they could just play a little more bully ball, and especially for those games in November in the Big Ten, there are days you're not going to throw the ball much. Like if you play a game at Minnesota, good luck to the quarterbacks because they no longer have an indoor facility. It's outdoors. So stuff like that, this is when a player like Manning can help you. I'm guessing he will play guard at least to start because I don't think he's the most fleet of foot kid. But in a box, he's not going to get overpowered. Like I can only imagine what he's going to max out at when he does squats, when he does bench press, chest press, different things. He's going to put some serious hurting on the weights.
Yeah, he's listed as an interior offensive lineman. He plays tackle primarily on his high school film, but as you mentioned, it's a wing T offense, so the pass protection element, he just doesn't get challenged a whole lot because they must not have a quarterback that they feel they can throw the football with. Do you think that, as he fights for playing time over the course of his career, and he's definitely not a guy that I see playing as a true freshman, I think he especially as much, if not more than his name just went right out of my head, Addison. I feel like he's got even more work to do to get himself into game shape there. But do you see him playing guard and staying at guard, or 6'6.5"? Typically, guys that tall are able to play tackle, or does he just not quite have the footwork for that?
I think it's debatable. Like he needs to lose 50 pounds and redistribute weight. This is a year-plus process, but he's a guy, no, he's not going to play, no, he's not going to play, then all of a sudden he's going to be good. Like once he figures out his body and his redistribution and like how he can step and do different things, that's going to go along with the fact that he's going to be playing a pro-style offense instead of a veer. Like that is the ultimate stunt your growth offense. I know it's great for the high schools, but it's terrible for development for recruits. So his ceiling is massive because you have no idea what he can do in pass pro.
Right.
You're recruiting him on his frame. I kept going on his film like, okay, I need to see at least one pass. There's no passing. There's none. It's one of the worst evaluation opportunities I've ever had, which is saying something. But that's what happens when you watch O linemen that play in any type of option offense. You have to know flat out whether or not they can pass protect. I don't remember a single rep of it. So Oregon has a lot to work with, but right now I would consider him a big piece of clay that you shouldn't expect to really play significantly until at least his third year. That would be my guess.
Well, forever a fun thought to ponder is who he may be protecting behind center for the Ducks. And they've got a bunch of quarterbacks, and they've got one committed in Akili Smith Jr., but they might be looking at another one. That's coming up next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. All that, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can save up to 60%, which last time I checked is more than half, off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Whatever you want, Game Time has got it. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So Oregon's quarterback room is among the best in all of college football. You've got Dylan Gabriel as the starter. You got Dante Moore as the backup. But so too is their future plan at the quarterback position. Dante Moore, probably the leading candidate to start in 2025. Austin Novosad will push for that. You've got Luke Moga on the roster, who's a freak athlete. You've got Akili Smith Jr. in the class of 2025. And yet Oregon doesn't feel, at this point in time, Brian, like that is enough, because former, I think, SMU commit, or SMU is at least involved in the pursuit of four-star quarterback Ty Hawkins in the class of 2025. And I did not have a second quarterback commit on my bingo card for Oregon this cycle, Brian. What do you make of the reports that Hawkins is considering Oregon?
I'm surprised you know what bingo is at your age, but that's definitely not your generation.
Oh, not yet.
Fair enough. I don't know what they're doing. The only thing I can think is they expect at least one guy to leave. Like already. I have no idea who it is, but like, why are you taking another one? As for the player himself, he's very good. I've seen him multiple times. Incredibly accurate. He's a very mature kid, well-spoken. He's the kind of guy you want to represent your program. Plays in Texas. He was at OT7 recently. Like, he's a really good football player. I don't think he's going to flip. He's a little different breed in terms of like his mentality, but I get why schools would want him. To put it in perspective of his style, he reminds me like an advanced kid you would see at Texas Tech, like year 3. Not necessarily the biggest guy, but he'll make the first guy miss. He extends plays, and he annoys you to death because on third down, he's money. Hawkins plays that way now, and he can throw it all over the field. He doesn't care what the moment is. He has even keel personality, his demeanor, same dude all day. You don't see a lot of teenagers like that in general, and it's great to have it with your quarterback. So I'm a big fan.
So he's currently committed to SMU, right?
TCU.
TCU, but SMU and Oregon are the schools that are reportedly going to be able to get a visit. And as you mentioned earlier in the show with Ziyare Addison, who had UCLA as the leading school until he went on a visit to Oregon. And as you said before, the Ducks have a propensity to have great visits. They do. And so when you get a guy of that caliber on campus, you certainly have an opportunity to make that sort of impression, even more so with the Ducks, especially if you go there this time of year when Eugene is just absolutely gorgeous, and Oregon in the summertime, as it's where I'm living, is absolutely amazing. So I want to go back to the quarterback discussion, because when you've got Luke Moga in there, who is maybe a little bit more undeveloped as a passer, but as we saw in the spring game, is a freak athlete. He had a play. I don't know if you saw it, Brian. He hands the ball off. It's around the 50-yard line. Running back veers to the right, runs into the wall, doesn't get tackled, cuts back to the left, breaks into the open field. He's darting right through the secondary. Luke Moga tracked him down from behind. He was behind the play. He just handed the ball off. It wasn't even really a zone read. He was out of the television screen, and as the running back is going in to the end zone, here comes Luke Moga to support his guy, just catching him from behind. And you're going, well, you're like, that's a quarterback? I don't know how you do it. So when I look at the quarterback room, I'm just pondering, like, which of these guys, maybe it's Austin Novosad because they brought in Dante Moore. He'd certainly be the most likely candidate to leave. But do you think there is a chance that Oregon at any point in time has 5 scholarship quarterbacks on their roster? Because that to me would feel like too many.
They will have 3 and at most 4 by the end of December.
This December.
There's no way. Like 3 is a high number anymore. It really is. Kids just won't wait. And especially like with Dante being next in line, like the chances of Novosad sticking around, if he does, I think are maybe 10%. And there's nothing you can do about it. If he doesn't beat Dante, whoever wins that battle stays, and who doesn't leaves. And here's the other part. If it's Dante and he's as good as I think he can be, I thought he was the best player in that class, period. He'll play his junior year, then he'll turn pro. Then where are you if you was him like that's what they're worried about. Because you can have all these other players. You can be great everywhere else. But if you stink at quarterback, you'll be 8-4 out of the playoffs with a roster. Otherwise, it could make a deep playoff run. I mean, it's just part of football. Sometimes coaches get caught in bad spots, and they might. When you have a quarterback turn pro early, it really upsets the apple cart. So I guess they're just trying to put as many bullets in the gun as they can. And if one of those guys leaves and then Dante takes off too, you probably got to go portal. And I know that doesn't work really well with young kids, but you're not going to take a playoff level team and let's just throw out a first-year sophomore or something. That's probably not what Dan's going to do. So you win and you lose with 5-star kids because they turn pro early. Ask LSU. They've had some wild swings with that over the years. So it's part of the game, though. Kids turn pro. You try to replace them the best you can, and it is what it is.
Do you think Oregon going after Ty Hawkins says anything about Akili Smith Jr., who is, of course, a really talented kid? He's been getting some accolades and praise from, these camps and recruiting services and whatnot. He's, of course, a legacy at Oregon. I know there are plenty of fans that are excited at the prospect of one day having Akili Smith Jr. as a starting quarterback for the Ducks. It's entirely possible, but if Hawkins came in, they would then be in the same class. Do you think that would scare Akili Smith Jr. off at all?
That's a legacy thing. And when I met him last summer at Future 50 in Florida, I didn't get the sense that he was worried about anything other than just getting better. I doubt it. I mean, he could go somewhere else. I mean, as far as I know, he could go to Fresno State, but I would imagine Oregon's going to be pretty hard to beat when your dad is who your dad is. They'd have to screw up his recruitment. I'm assuming they have talked to him about this because you don't want to blindside a kid with it. That would be the one way you can completely screw this up.
Yep.
So believe me, there are coaches dumb enough not to make that phone call in advance. I've plenty of those stories for another day, but I don't think Oregon and Dan are that way. Dan's a very savvy guy. He has a plan with
I'm
I'm guessing they've said something to Akili. Just my opinion, and I bet he signs with Oregon.
I would be pretty shocked if, Akili Smith first found out that Hawkins is taking a visit on Twitter. That would
not go well.
That would not go over well, but neither you nor myself expect that to be the case. We've still got more coming up here with Brian because there are other names in the class of 2025 that Oregon is after. And, well, one name that Oregon was kind of after a little bit went to Ohio State. What does that mean for Oregon's pursuits of other such players? We'll talk about that next. Okay, Brian, let's get back into it. Faheem Delane was a highly recruited defensive back, ends up choosing Ohio State. Oregon had more of an outside chance there, but it's not about that Ohio State landed a guy to me. It's more that Oregon didn't land a guy, and they're going after some big-time defensive back prospects right now. I want to start with DJ Pickett because he's from the Florida area, as you know, and Ziyare Addison, who is also from the Florida area, right after he committed to Oregon, was tweeting at DJ Pickett, who had just been on a visit, "Hey man, come to Oregon, get over here." Do you expect that Oregon is going to be able to land at least one of these 5-star DBs that they've been after for some time?
It'd be pretty unsurprising to me. I mean, they've done a good job recruiting DJ. And for the record, Dallas Wilson, Ziyare Addison, and DJ all live in the Tampa area. They all know each other. So I would be surprised if Oregon wasn't at least a finalist for Pickett. They weren't at least a finalist for a lot of other kids in Florida, Alabama. They've done a great job. I don't think 5-star thing means anything because so many kids in the South now like Oregon a lot, DBs included. Pickett, I don't know where he's going to go. Some say the LSU, some say Miami. I just know that he likes Oregon a lot. He's been there, 2-3 times?
He's been there at least twice.
Yeah. So a kid from Tampa doesn't just go out to Oregon for fun. So he has to like the school. I don't think Georgia has much a shot, but he took a visit there recently. He's got a Miami visit coming up, etc. He'll make his decision. I believe it's the 5th of October, but DJ does not like media. He doesn't talk to anybody anymore. So we'll have to wait and see. But Oregon's in the middle of the race. I've inquired about him recently. That Oregon's involved, and I'm sure because Zaire knows him, is probably sending him texts as we speak.
Let's talk about wide receiver Marcus Harris. He's got a Final Four of schools seen as Georgia, Tennessee, UCLA, and Oregon. And I mean, props to Deshaun Foster. I've talked about this on Locked On College Football before. He's recruiting much better than I thought he was going to be able to, at least in the early portion of his stint taking over for our old friend Chip Kelly. But have you heard anything on Marcus Harris and whether Oregon could go after, what would be their fourth receiver in the 2025 class?
Oregon or UCLA, ironically, as you mentioned, seems to be the trending pick. He's another one of those LA kids that Oregon always seems to do well with. They need to do a really good job on the visit. Everything's got to go right, but I don't know what UCLA is really selling compared to Oregon, like the facilities and the investment and all that. I'm curious to see if he does an interview with anybody afterwards because the commitment to football at the two schools doesn't have much in common.
No, not at all.
Maybe he just wants to stay in, like going to UCLA. I get it. Like going to school there is Northside LA. Yeah, there's palm trees and it's all clean and it's nice. I get it. You're going to go 7-5 to 9-3. That's who you're going to be.
Best case. Best case.
Yeah, like after he gets it going, like that's like now they might be 3-9 to 5-7. Like
that's where I have them in 2024. I do not think UCLA is a good team this year.
No, they lost too many good players.
I completely agree.
They're not spending on NIL like other schools, etc. They're in trouble. But maybe he can get that turned around. Is the vision he's selling? Like he came close to getting Zaire. He came close on some other kids too. So he must be a pretty good recruiter. I remember him as a recruit myself. I interviewed the guy a long time ago. Great football player. But now he's trying to do something without all the money and all the frills that other people have for their football locker rooms and all that stuff. That can't be very easy. I'm not sure how well that's going to go, not only this summer, but more importantly in November, December, when kids put pen to paper.
Do you feel old yet interviewing a head coach who you remember interviewing as a player, covering recruiting once upon a time?
No, I got Carson Palmer stories for you if you want. I'm going to go all done.
That's fantastic. Let's talk about a couple more names here that Oregon's after. Trajan Odom along the defensive line. So far, Oregon's defensive line recruits that they have in the 2025 cycle who have committed are kind of a little bit more edge guys. I guess Matthew Johnson, can kind of slide inside, outside is maybe a little bit of a doorless type. Nasir White is just a pure speed edge rusher, and I mean speed edge rusher, but Trajan Odom would be kind of the first bulky defensive lineman. There are some other notable schools after him, though.
Yeah, that's a really unique recruitment. SC and Oregon and Ohio State for a kid from just outside of Charlotte. And
I think, isn't Colorado in the mix, or have they kind of fallen off?
They might be. I have not seen, but I mean, that would be par for the course because it doesn't make sense. That's recruiting for the 2025 class. I have no idea where that kid's going. I refuse to try to make any prediction on it. I heard somebody talk about, it's going to be Ohio State. And I'm like, based on what? What tea leaves are you reading? Because his list doesn't even have an ACC school in it. So, and he's from Charlotte. It's just bizarre. I have no interest in trying to guess on that one, man. But he is really good. LSU recruited him, a whole bunch of schools. He just has a funky list.
Yeah, Oregon trying to get into the mix there. Curious that there are no ACC schools. He's got 4 ACC schools in the state. I hope they at least offered. I mean, you got North Carolina, NC State, Wake Forest, and Duke. Don't forget about the Demon Deacons. But you got 4 ACC schools in the state, so clearly he's looking. I guess, to go outside the conference. I mean, that's kind of how it appears. Is that one of those names that Oregon fans you think should look at, Brian, and say, if Oregon wasn't in the Big Ten, they wouldn't have as good of a chance?
Agreed. I think that's going to pay dividends for kids in the South and the Midwest. There may not be a ton of them, but if you just add one or two more players a year that you wouldn't have got before, okay, I'll take that. That's how you got to look at it. And over a 4 or 5 year period, that changes your roster quite a bit.
One last 5-star DB to talk about, Trey McNutt. He's been tied to Oregon before, certainly not the only school that's recruiting him. Is there anything with regards to his recruitment that indicates where he might be leaning right now?
I still think it's Ohio State. That's everything that I've heard. But why hasn't he committed there? Because they've made him a priority. That's the one thing that's weird. The kids in Ohio are very loyal to Ohio State if the Buckeyes go after him, and they did. Why is he still taking visits? Maybe he's the kid that usually loses like one kid a year kind of randomly. Maybe he's that guy this year, because if he doesn't commit to them this month and drags it out, then I would be worried if I was Ohio State.
Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network. Appreciate it as always. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.